All right, I think it's live now. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the Insight and Guidance for the Next Generation of Technology Leaders panel discussion. So today we're aiming to provide the next generation of energy innovators, technology leaders, and entrepreneurs with the practical knowledge that will prepare them for their journey ahead based on the experience of our panelists here. So can you guys introduce yourself and what you do and give a brief description of your technology industry, if that's all right? So I'll start with Warren here.
Sure, thanks for that. Hi, my name is Warren Chung. I'm the president of Well Resources. I'm a registered professional engineer with APEGA, and I'm a University of Alberta alum. My educational background is in chemical biomedical engineering. But with that said, my professional experience has been weighted towards project management and asset valuation types of roles, particularly for upstream Canadian assets. However, since transitioning over to my role here at Well, my focus has now shifted towards process development and process licensing for new technologies in the clean tech space. At Well, our shorter term goal is to service the needs of petroleum sector stakeholders by adding value to their operations, by providing smart, safe, efficient, and sustainable technologies. And our longer term goals are to build on the experience and expertise in innovating in the petroleum sector to unlock new cross-sector opportunities, whether that be reimagining the way we use petroleum byproducts for value-added purposes, or looking at innovations in other technologies altogether. I've been involved in the development and commercialization of various technologies marketed by Well, as well as a number of other endeavors which are still at either the testing or pre-commercial phase. So I'm really excited to be here with you today and for the opportunity to share my experiences.
All right, I'll hand it off to Gerald now.
Thanks, Ro, and nice to meet you, Warren. So my name's Gerald Desrochers. I am a Métis entrepreneur. I'm a certified engineering technologist from SAIT with a industrial automation background, and I'm just in the process of completing my MBA with the Royal Roads University. I've been in the automation business for about 30 years now, and during that time I started 2 companies. I've worked in a variety of capacities with automation engineering firms and vendors, and I've also led multidisciplinary engineering teams of about over 85 people working with clients like Suncor. My career spans those 30 years primarily in automation, working with clients in the oil and gas sector and the chemical sector, like chemicals, companies like Orica, for example. Mining, we do a lot of work with Northwest Territories and heavy oil with CNRL, Suncor, people like that. Currently, my role is a senior partner at Total Control Solutions Group, in which we provide a full vertical of automation services. Yeah, and I've been, my technology journey actually started quite young. By the time I was 22, I actually knew 6 programming languages. I saw the power of automation and robotics, being able to program in machine language and to be able to make machines do pretty much whatever you want them to do was so awe-inspiring to me. And 35 years later, I'm looking at what we have now in terms of disruptive technologies, and it's incredible with renewables, electric cars, AI, machine learning, microsatellites. In my space, IIoT, Industrial Internet of Things, is becoming a dominant force in which everything is being connected, and data is really the new commodity. So how you manage that data is becoming very, very important. And you can do so many more things with that data now. And we're seeing automation increasing really at a rapid rate. Yeah, I could talk about this for a while, but I'll close it off there.
All right, and then now I'll pass the question off to Keng.
Okay, my name is Keng Chung, and 40-some years ago, I guess I'm just like one of the many students at USC, and I was the first graduate student that working on SEC-D, so as you know. So now I know in Calgary there are a lot of people are at least familiar with how do you actually produce the heavy oil with the SEC-D. And since then, I I worked for Syncrude for 20 years. I worked for Syncrude for 30 years. So very much into, like how to so-called like, do the tech service to fix out the plan. And one thing leading to another, you realize that a lot of the thing that we are doing with the bitumen is very different from refining, because even though we talk about oil like oil, but like the bitumen is definitely not the same kind of like conventional crude oil like we familiar in the refining setting. And even though, like for instance, if you go to Fort McMurray, like all these so-called upgraded, they look like refinery, but yet they're different. So this, let me keep going about figure out, what's so funny about this bitumen, right? So since then, we keep, asking the question is like, can we do better? Can we do better? And, I think for some of you are familiar with the oil industry that in Alberta, you realize that, a lot of things is not just like, what we are taught in the graduate school or something. Like if you are coming out with something new or something awesome and somebody is going to use it, it turned out that, for most of the company that have invested billions of dollars on the ground, if you basically tell them there's something different or something new, it's kind of good to know, but it's not really a cup of tea for them. Okay, so with that, I decided to just quit, and then I decided to do something like just like challenge the status quo. And even though at that time it's purely for the energy sector, so since then, again, I kind of leading to some of my background is like, it so happened like, when I was at Syncrude and we had Syncrude research, and back in the 80s, like most of because of the recession and because of pretty much all the North American market are saturated. And the first thing is like, the oil company, the major oil company now, they just shut down the R&D, and basically it's like, if we are not going to build any more new refinery, why should we even invest in new technology? So this is what is so unique about what's going on in the 80s, right? Because and when Syncrude still have this so-called a new plant up running, and they need to have some kind of tech service, and they still maintain the research department. And I happen to be like, get a lot of graduate students come to to Canada at that time, from China, from India or whatever. And some of my colleagues, when they ask me like, why you just have so many of these foreign students are still interested in oil refining, and I told them, I say, maybe it's a sunset industry in Canada or US, but the sun come out in the Far East. So so it turned out that like this is what we are seeing is like, in the last 30 years, we don't see anything new, like I couldn't say new, but it said that there's no fundamentally different in terms of what we do think in Canada or US. It's just a minor kind of tweak here and tweak there, okay, on the so-called technology kind of so-called platform. And obviously the previous speaker just talked about the IT and some of those automation. Definitely that changed a lot since I was a student, right? Back in the day, we still kind of figured out how to do analog to digital. And today, if you don't know the digital, you kind of like, where you come from, that kind of thing. So that's a good thing, right? That I think it make a lot of, progress. So just to kind of like have a quick jump into what I'm doing since then is like, I quit my job, and then, in China, I have lab in China, I have lab in Taiwan. I had 200-300 students, like, and so-called like the research people working with me. And this is how I know I look at it. It's like, whoa, this is really something, like, not just like, it for some of the people like who are interested to kind of venture out, you should look beyond what your neighbor or whatever, or your surrounding. There are other things going on. So the next thing is like, I kind of sit on the board of the China University of Petroleum. So that is, imagine in Canada, we produce something like, 4 million barrels of oil. We hardly have a department that actually do petroleum, right? It's kind of like, my understanding at UOA, they had to kind of like get rid of the mining and petroleum and merge it with civil engineering or something, right? But in China, Petroleum University is one of the three major university do petroleum. They have like 20,000 students. They do nothing but petroleum. So to just give you some idea, there are a lot of things going on up there. And then after that, I also get involved with the China Academy of Science, and you probably saw some of the high-speed rail and all these things. And it's all the so-called the science. They really get into so-called like the science and technology. This is why sometimes when we see some of the video, we are like, whoa, how come China is moving so fast? Well, they have a lot of people is one thing, but then they really put an effort to actually, go from being, riding on a bicycle to something like what you call the high-speed train now. So this is some of the things that going on, and along with that, I think I also have a opportunity to participate in some of the advisory type of committee. For example, one of them I thought is pretty good is like to regulate the mining industry in China. In other words, you can't just go to lobby someone, now it become a central body now, and everybody do the same thing for the entire country now. So there's some of the so-called like, off part-time job, like I kind of like, I participate in those community and learn a lot, right? So today,
Awesome.
what I end up doing now, I start out doing energy. But today, I start to branch out into water treatment, food production. And I just wondering whether you know about this or not, because, when you live in Alberta for too long doing energy, you kind of forgot some of the essential of the life. For instance, the food, water, and energy nexus. So this is one of the top three. Is the top three so-called like 17 category, the UN they identify as a sustainable development goal. So this is
And
why I
I'm
think,
gonna have to close you off
yeah,
a little bit after this just to
sure.
move on to the
So
next
anyway,
question
so this is
afterwards.
what I want to end for here on the introduction, and then we get on to this next question. Okay, yeah.
All right. So for the next question, what are some of the most important considerations, in your opinion, to take into account when scaling up commercial business? So I'll pass it off to Gerald first.
Well, so my what I'll be referring to is the consulting world. So in my experience, I started off with 2 people, and at the peak we were close to 90, and I sold my company, and I guess I was bored, so I did it again. So the most important considerations, I would say, number one, cash flow. It's so elementary, but so critical. Even if you have the best idea, the best concept, best whatever, the time between selling something and getting paid for it could break companies. A lot of companies actually go out of business, and not because they couldn't find the work, but because they couldn't manage cash flow. The other thing about scaling up, I think, is really important is, and this is about business in general, is just be passionate about what you do. One of the things is, if you're going in as an entrepreneur, boy, it's not a part-time job. It's not a 40-hour-a-week job. It is going to consume you, and you better really be passionate about what it is you're doing, because if you're not passionate about it, life is going to suck. The other thing is, don't take yourself too seriously. One of the problems is, as you know, when you start off with a couple of people and you're working with your friend and it's just the 2 of you, that's fine. But as you start to grow, as you start to get more power and responsibility and such, it's really easy to get lost in the moment, and people take themselves too seriously. It's really important to be humble and not to take yourself too seriously. And the last 2 is, people are a core component of any business. Without people, it's difficult to scale up. And the last one is culture. when I first got into business, I didn't understand the power of culture, both positive and negative. If it's not managed properly, it can make a company great, or it can make a company fall apart at the seams. So those are my thoughts.
So I think that segues really nicely into the second part of that question. So how does a company's operational philosophy and method change as they grow larger? So you did mention that, scaling up with the people, going from a few of your friends to an established kind of hierarchy. Could you speak a little bit more about that kind of?
Yeah, for sure. So the big thing is starting with a vision, knowing where you're going to go. One of the things about business planning, in my opinion, is business planning is important, but it really is nothing more than a couple of goalposts, because as you're going down that road, things are going to change constantly. But as long as you know where you're going to go, you can adjust. And one of the things that people bring to the table is their ability to adjust, to respond to things that you didn't expect to respond. As long as you know where to go, that's going to help. And but the culture is the other thing too. Is I think going in, being aware of the impact that you have on culture, being aware of the kind of people you want to bring to you to help grow your company is important, and that the culture goes with that. So if you start with a good vision, and if you start with the kind of place you want to create. One of the things Richard Branson said, who I follow, is he says starting a business is like starting with a blank canvas. It's blank, and what do you want to paint? What do you want to do? What do you want to create? That's the power of being an entrepreneur. It's so fun. But having that vision, recognizing the importance of culture, is important, and establishing your values, your typical vision values, is part of that too.
Right, definitely. So I'll turn that question over to Warren and Keng as well. Considering you guys are both the president and the vice president of the same company, is there a similar kind of thought as Gerald, or is there any other, what do you think is the most important consideration to take into account?
Yeah, maybe I should jump in first. First of all, I like to kind of echo what Gerald just said. I think the first thing is especially if you want to be the entrepreneur, but being innovative or whatever, you don't need to be an entrepreneur. You can be kind of work for the big company too. But obviously, we're gonna leave some of the more details, started different between the two different categories later on. But I think I want to echo what she said. We have to make sure, whoever that want to do this had to make sure that there's no such thing as no longer a paycheck to paycheck type of life anymore. Okay, and you better should be prepared, especially to figure out the finance part of it. Okay, and you should be prepared for those kind of things. It's not going to be like every second week the paycheck coming. No, it's not going to happen. Okay, and you should be prepared for those things. And then because we are talking about all these science and technology type of so-called company startup. So I like to kind of give a very generic type of so-called the stages, so that you know what it is. If you have some good idea, well, that's only just a good idea. But you should understand this from just a good idea to become commercialization, and you can start to count your money in your bank, right? That is a different ball game, because it divides into 4 stages. If you had a good idea, you may want to do some exploratory kind of tinkling about this and that. This is what we call the band scale, kind of experiment, or some kind of simple test that you do, right? Just to see whether the idea works. So that may be just maybe you can get, for instance, you can pay some graduate student to do some of those things, right? Then the next one come the proof of concept. Proof of concept will be get involved with some pilot test, right? In other words, if the idea when they put together become like a process, does it work, right? Does it work? So now you get into a little bit, you need more money now. So the question is so who is going to fund this kind of project? So after you've done all this, then the next question is, can this kind of, so-called the good idea build at the plant, at the some kind of like, at the field. So this is what we call the field pilot. It's called the demonstration coming in, right? So these are the stages. And when you do the demonstration, you probably like in the case of the energy type, so-called like energy engineering project, you like to know what is a so-called like material balance, heat balance. And this is get into the cost, right? The cost of running the process. So once you've done all these things, then the next big one now is called commercialization. Okay, so when you get to commercialization, and assuming that someone write you a check and get this thing built, I think you're all set. But that is ideal. That is ideal, and life never been ideal. Trust me. Okay, and for instance, like this is why I say like you always have to start. I think one of the witness being the energy engineering or the scientist type of training is like, we don't get to learn a lot of business. We don't even understand sometimes how the business world are talking. Like they talk about, do you have the business plan? Do you have what's that? So you should understand it. You see, the people who is going to basically give you the money to do all those things, it's not because he like you, he like your idea. No. He want to make sure that he's going to get his cut, okay? He want to know his investment get paid off. That's why he's in the business of investing, right? So you should understand all those things. And some of my so-called so-called like not so good experience with our so-called Alberta company is this. Because they are in the oil sand, for instance, I developed some of these technology, meant to do some good for the oil sand industry. When I go to talk to them, first of all, they say, I'm not going to be the first one. That's fair enough. Okay, so we're going to get it built somewhere, and then you be the second one. But then you basically talk to them again. You know what they're going to tell you? They say, since this is, look, your technology is for the oil sand, and I'm the oil sand operator, I should get it for free. Wow, that is something that, you never thought about this, right? But this thing can happen. So I just kind of like trying to run through some of the people that you understand why sometimes you ask yourself, why our Alberta oil industry are in the big mess? They don't have to be a big mess, but because that's what it is. Because, a lot of the corporate culture, like what Gerald was saying, okay, they are not like, if you have something good or new, they will jump into it. Like, like you had iPhone, let's say 10 or iPhone 11 or 12. It doesn't work that way in our industry. Okay, so these are the things that I think you should understand the 4 stages of the so-called like the development, and you should start thinking. Okay, sometimes you have to start thinking now. What is your role? How you like to play a role in these 4 stages? Okay, first of all, maybe you have the financial backing or whatever. Maybe you will do the first 2. Okay, and maybe you should decide it, like in the case of, for instance, a lot of software industry. They will then sell it to the big company now. So let the big company will take to the next stage. So these are the things that you should understand, like what, what is to be successful. And then, you have to basically kind of like, some people, I think that being an entrepreneur, they seems to be kind of like, feel like, this is all my idea and I had to see to the end of it. They don't let go. I think that is wrong. I think sometimes you should get involved with some people and can give you, a better fit. For instance, as I said, being a technical training, we're not very good in doing money stuff. We might think that, I have some money in the bank account, but that's not quite the same. Okay. So you should actually, like open yourself out and be like Gerald just say, be humble about, some of your deficiency. Okay. And somebody can bring to the table and help you move on. And I think the last one is like, you should also start thinking about the succession planning, like who will, like just in case you walk out there and you get COVID-19. So what are you going to do, right? So this is a very, it sounds kind of funny, right? But if you think about an investor that is going to give you millions of dollars, he's not going to be just kind of say, wow, the guy get the COVID-19. No, he will have to know like what is the backup plan of your proposal, right? So these are the things that I think, I think later on we're going to talk about some other kind of like, the big picture, but these are the things that you should be aware of, right? Because obviously, like if you work for a company, they want you to do the same thing too. But then the end of the day, you know, I think this is what sometimes most of the people in Calgary are facing is like, oh, now that they're going to have big layoff. You know what? The crisis going to happen whether you like it or not, right? But at least you have some kind of backup plan that you can kind of say, you know what? I had a plan B. That's why I'm trying to kind of share with all the audience today, right? Because I went through all those kind of things. Yeah. Anyway, back to you.
Yes. There was a point earlier back you made where you said that essentially like scaling up business exposes some of the gaps that you might have that you wouldn't have thought of before. So I thought that was a really interesting point to make. Yeah, so I'll pass it off to Warren first to put in your set as well.
Sure. And what I will say based on my personal journey, especially when it comes to clean technologies, particularly in the oil and gas sector, I would say that there are generally two pieces of the equation that you absolutely have to get right as an entrepreneur, as an inventor looking to grow a business or have a business into the future. The first is making absolutely certain that the science behind your product is scientifically sound. And then the second one is being able to successfully navigate what we've talked about, that concept of going from commercial status, from concept to commercial status all the way to sales afterwards. And each of those steps will present its own set of difficulties and challenges along the way, and you have to be able to adopt accordingly. So for me personally at Well, like depending on the day, I might have to wear a couple of different hats, either like one of those as a researcher and a scientist, or the very next day I could be the project manager or head of business development. And having that flexibility to be able to wear all these different hats will ultimately allow you to really understand how everything melds together, works together, and also be able to pivot quickly when new challenges arise. Another thing that I want to talk about is just market knowledge in general. I think this is a broad piece of advice that can be applicable regardless of what sector you're in or what your business offers or plans to offer. And that is familiarize yourself with the local market and identify any barriers to entry very early on, and then plan and act accordingly. And you know, if you're realistic about this, this could save you an enormous amount of time and money down the road, and it can even set the course as to whether or not you'll actually ultimately be successful or not in your endeavors. And to add to that, just because you might have a business that's based out of Canada, it doesn't necessarily mean that your immediate opportunities will be here in Canada. They could also be from abroad. So just try to take a step back and look at the bigger picture and identify where your best opportunities are. And that's really applicable to one of the earlier journeys that we've had at Well over here in commercializing a technology that Keng talked about, specifically originally for solving problems in the Alberta oil patch, but we solved elsewhere. We originally developed the process. It was a process that I actually talked about previously today in a previous webinar. It was about processing and transporting and utilizing oil sands and bitumen in a better way. And we developed technology that basically cleans it up and makes it easier to process. And Keng mentioned some of the barriers to entry that we had here in North America. So what we did was we took a step back. We spent some time thinking about what our business strategy was going to be, where we want to be long term, and we decided that we wanted to be in the Asian markets. And what we were able to do was quite successfully commercialize the technology, license the technology to a number of refineries, and add tremendous value to their operations. So at the end of the day, depending on what you're bringing to the market, different regions of the world will have different priorities, and that should be a consideration when formulating your business strategy.
Awesome. I think that's a really good segue into our next question, and that will be our last, and we'll move into Q&As. So what are the biggest lessons learned from your own experience that you would give to students graduating and starting their own careers? So what are some things that you have learned that you think if students knew, it would make their journey a lot easier, I guess would be the word. So I'll pass it off to Warren first.
Sure. I think especially early on when you have an idea, it might be a great idea, might not be, but we all wish it or hope it would be. If you're going to build a business around a product or an idea, risk management is very important, especially in the early phase. At Well, one of the biggest cash burns for us is investing in research and development. And if an idea is interesting to us, we won't be shy to invest the money to investigate it further. Many times these efforts don't actually lead to anything tangible, but that's just simply a cost of doing a business in the R&D space for us. And as a form of risk management, one thing that we've been able to do quite successfully is form a number of partnerships with various institutes that share common goals with us. And through these partnerships, we'll either share staff, we'll collaborate on ideas, we'll jointly fund research endeavors to mitigate and share the costs and the risk. And this type of business development, I think, is something that we've been a believer in since day one. Not everybody does that, but it has worked quite well for us. And I think that should be a consideration for you. Another thing that we haven't actually talked about yet is just the role of intellectual property. And I think that is something that's really important when we're dealing in the innovation space. So when it comes to like intellectual property, the first thing that I will say is don't be afraid to leverage prior art. And what I mean by this is that you should understand, like, how did we get to the status quo today? What processes, technologies, or products we use today, and how are they an improvement from like the previous ways of doing things? And when you understand this and put in the time to understand the existing knowledge base, it can save you a lot of time when you go out to perform your own R&D, so that you're not reinventing the wheel. And being able to identify the shortcomings of that prior art can also inspire you to think of new solutions, new ways of approaching problems that have not yet been considered. So, that might be a source of, thinking about new ideas for your own projects down the road. And then if you can demonstrate the mastery and understanding of that prior art and what is in existence today, if you're applying for a patent application, and if you're able to effectively communicate how your invention is different or an improvement, it will make your case way more stronger and harder to scrutinize when your patent ultimately gets examined. And then the last thing, just in relation to intellectual property and patents, especially for a small or early stage company that might be capital constrained, effectively budgeting can make or break you. Understanding the processes and costs associated with obtaining intellectual property protection is very important. Depending on the complexity and nature of your invention, it could cost anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 up to $25,000 for a single patent. And also plan for what jurisdictions you want to sell into and be selective of where you file your intellectual property rights, as those legal fees can pile up quite quickly.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's a lot of really good information. Apologies for that. Yeah. So I'll pass it off to Gerald now.
Okay, thanks, Ro. So I guess a few things I'm thinking about. The first one is failing is good. We are so trained to think that failing is bad, when in fact, if you fail, it means you're trying. I mean, if you look at Elon Musk with SpaceX, he blew up a lot of rockets. And on his journey towards introducing a disruptive technology that is now rocking the space world in terms of exploration and mining, and you name it, he's just opened up a whole new sector with this. Another one is, and Keng brought this up, is really to do a gap analysis on yourself. Being smart with engineering, being smart with whatever it is from a technical perspective is great, but that does not mean that you have the skill sets necessary to manage money or to have the skill sets to build relationships or what have you. There's a lot of pieces for a business to operate successfully. If you can continue to be humble and just do a gap analysis on yourself, and say, okay, what am I good at? What am I not good at? And then connect yourself with people that complement you. You'll be a much stronger team as a result. So it's okay to not be good at everything. And if we had an hour, I could tell you about all the good things I'm not good at. The other thing is networking. I would like to think I've been successful in business, and the reason why I would say I was successful is really in great part to the network I have of friends, of colleagues, of people who have bounced ideas off, and also for the potential for growing business in the future. And so one of my recommendations is, as you come out of university, join these societies. Like I'm a past president of the International Society of Automation. And this is not, if you're interested in that kind of thing, I'd suggest joining that. And then because we have monthly events, there's many things like the Canadian Hydrocarbon CHOA, Hydrocarbon Association of Alberta, I think it is. Anyways, there's different types. There's the Canadian Gas Association.
I think it's Canadian Heavy Oil Association. I want to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. To note, both ISA, CHOA, CSIR, and WELL are also in the networking session after this. So, I mean, if you guys want to join in, kind of further talk to them, like, yeah, that's. Sorry, go on.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's exactly. And so joining those is a good opportunity to understand what's happening in the industry, to make connections, to develop that network. The other thing is don't stop learning. Just because you've completed your degree and you're leaving university now and you're going to go into the wonderful world of business or whatever it is you want to get into, should not mean you should stop learning. There's so many things happening in our society today that's happening in terms of disruptive technologies, and it's really important to stay on top of that, to understand how it impacts you at your business, and maybe some opportunities that might result from that. So that's another thing, is don't stop learning. And again, the final thing is before embarking on that journey, whatever that journey might be, really take a good hard look at where you want to be and what that end game looks like. With the caveat, be careful what you wish for, because sometimes you could be so driven towards something that you might achieve it, but you lose everything else as a result of it. So it's got to be a balanced approach, but that's a really good one as well. So those are my thoughts.
Perfect. And last but not least, Keng, your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I just want to kind of open out this one, just the so-called the first statement for the so-called newly graduating student. I think you probably heard about, people talk about like career and job, okay? I think in our lifetime, maybe like 20 or 30 years of working life, you probably have maybe 2 or 3 career, okay? But you're going to have like hundreds of jobs that you need to get done. Okay, so just to make sure that you understand this, like when people say do a good job, wow, that's only a good job, but that doesn't mean like you have a career yet. Okay,
yeah.
Having said that, okay, this is the next thing I want to kind of like tell people is this: there's no such thing as like one size fit all, because people are different, okay, and another thing is like the real thing is not quite ideal at all, okay. So to start out with, like what you ask, if you were to ask me, what should you do next, I would say, what, maybe it's good like you should work for someone for 5 to 10 years and really understand what the industry is about, okay, because university is a perfect, so-called like ivory tower. For instance, you can say, I make a mistake, or you're done with it. Okay, maybe you get 10 points less. In the real setting, you probably get fired. So this is some of the things that you should be aware about this, right? So, learning some of those things. And then, when you get on with your so-called like your your life or your career now, I think one of the things that you should always remember, I think Gerald already mentioned that, you should start build your character, people, because when you go out there, when we talk about the people skill or whatever, you have to make sure that, you in front of people, you do have the integrity, when people will like to talk about you and not just talk bad about you. Okay, that is very important, because networking and this is where you build your so-called your your group kind of thing. And then the next thing I think is equally important is like you had to be competent. Like what Warren was saying, something like, in the case of our company is like, we make sure that what we do, after we thought about some idea, we like to check the science, make sure that it's solid, like we are not magician, we are scientists, we are engineers. So we had to be, we had to do things that competent. And the next one will be hard work, a lot of hard work. Okay. Whether you work for someone or you work for yourself, trust me, hard work is a must. Okay. It's everyday, like life, you had to deal with. And then, as I say earlier, I think Gerald also said about this, learn more about some, like this is thing that we are not very good at, is like we had to learn more about business, like, because we are going to talk to a lot of people that, guess what, a lot of things we do without money, we can't do anything. So we had to understand, how the financial market, how those guys are thinking, and how the money management, like how you going to look after all this. Okay. And keep in mind, there's no such thing as only one right answer, okay? Because you will be surprised sometimes, and if you be kind of like saying, oh, this is the only right thing to do, no, you will be kill yourself, because there are a lot of other things that people can do, okay? So if you don't feel like people are kind of go along with what you were thinking, that's okay. You can wait for a while or wait it out, or you can look for other ways to achieve your goal sometime, okay? And then I think the next thing, you ask yourself the next question now is, should I work for someone or should I, start be the entrepreneur? Again, there are a lot of pro and con, right? But one thing I can guarantee you is this: being entrepreneur is so rewarding, and if you accomplish something, okay? For instance, if you work for someone, there's something called a party line, okay? Whether, like, the company have their company kind of like the way they like to do things. So it may not align with your personal code of ethic or the moral standard, okay? But if you own your own company, you can say, no, I'm not going to do it. That's it. So this is something that I think, it gives you something that at least when you come home every night, you can sleep better. I think that is very important sometimes, right? So I think, so obviously, like, being entrepreneur, you also carry a lot of risk, up and down, all this kind of thing. But sometimes when I look at, what happening today, for instance, 2 years ago, if we have this discussion, people might say, oh, you're wasting your time. We have a lot of big company, they hire so many people. But today, you see what happened? You have COVID, you have low oil price, so many people are unemployed. So this is why I said, like, having some kind of thing, in your pocket, it will safeguard, some of the crisis that we are going through. Because being an entrepreneur, is a crisis every day. Trust me, it's a house on fire all the time. Maybe not a house on fire, maybe the kitchen on fire every day. Okay.
Maybe the kitchen, sometimes the bathroom.
Minor fires.
Well, now people don't smoke in the bathroom now anyway. Anyway, so this is what I'm trying to kind of like, send a message to my fellow student, because, I'm counting on you guys to make a better future so I can retire better. Okay. So the next, concluding remark I want to give to everyone is this: whether you like it or not, the world is changing. The world is changing even faster every day. It keeps moving forward. The question is, are you going to be part of the so-called like the wave, or you going to be hit by the wave? So this is the thing that you have to decide, right? No right answer, but something like maybe tonight when you go home, you should start dream about this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you guys, all Gerald, Warren, and Keng for all your remarks. And I think this is really good. So we'll get into the questions now. The first one was by, I'm so sorry if I mispronounce this, Juan Marin. And I think it's for Gerald based on the first question. And it is, how do you plan, control, and review the culture of a company? And what are the best tools to do it?
Okay. How do you plan, control the culture? The biggest thing is understanding where culture comes from, and that's from you. So as a leader, as the entrepreneur, you have that power to create the culture. So in order to understand what that's going to look like, it's important for you to understand what your values are. And one of the things Keng brought up was, you might end up working for a company that don't align with your values. That's because the culture is not aligned with you. So it's really important to understand what your values are, what's important for the organization's values, and those values will help drive that culture. And being very open with that, being very transparent with that, will allow people who are looking to work for your company to understand, okay, what are you about? Okay, there's your vision and statement of it. Okay, I understand. Perfect. No, not for me. Or, yes, that resonates with me. And then what happens is that culture starts to get created over time, tied to those values.
Right. Wonderful. Are there any remarks from Huang and Keng, or should I move on to the second question?
Yeah, just to add to what Gerald said, I would say that make sure that you set realistic goals and timelines for what you want to achieve within your company and within your staff, and make sure that you're continually reviewing it and making modifications as needed. At least from like the financial side, they always talk about like quarterly earnings and annual performance. I would say have the same type of reflection period for yourself internally, especially if you're early stage company or you have limited number of staff. You can be afforded to have these monthly, quarterly reviews to see, hey, where are we as a company? What do we want to have as a corporate culture? How does that reflect on us as we go forward and are outward looking, and just keep working on that. Look at it annually, 5 years. Always have those types of objectives and make sure that you're staying on track.
Awesome. Yeah, in the interest of time, I will move on to the second question. We only have 10 minutes left, so I do want to, yeah, keep everyone within this. So the second question is, in your opinion, what is the best way the next generation can be shared and implemented within multiple industries and companies to ensure that we have the highest level of efficiency and effectiveness? So I think this relates more to, job creation as well as where are new grads needed, essentially? And what kind of are new grads, what should they aim for to really be able to succeed in a sense, I think?
I'm not sure if Warren or Keng brought this up, but I think the most important thing is to be able to pivot, to be able to adjust, to be flexible. For example, right now with the oil and gas industry, specifically the heavy oil industry and conventional oil, what we're seeing is people are very adamant that, renewables aren't coming, renewables aren't good, all this kind of stuff. And like Keng brought up, it's a wave. It's happening. There's an energy transition going on. You can either look at that and go, okay, this is going to change things and pivot, or get hit by the wave.
Right.
I do have something to add. Is this? I think in addition to like Gerald just said, okay, I think especially for the generation to come, okay, many generations to come now, I think we do not have this so-called the tradition type of engineering discipline anymore. You may be, like me, I myself start out with a chemical engineer, right? But today I'm more like a farmer because I get into water treatment, or I get into like growing food now, right? Why?
Yeah.
Because why not? Because you see, this is why I think all the student, you know, like whoever, you know, whatever kind of discipline you are in, please, you know, don't just think that that's it. You know, I only know mechanical engineering. No, you have to start look around, and you know, like cross the boundary. Okay, like interdiscipline kind of stuff now, because you think about it, you know. No, when I in the engineering school, that is very tradition. You know, we even have something called chemical engineering education. They are the group of people. They will basically figure out what is the right way to educate a chemical engineer. But today, no such thing anymore, because you know what? You can buy CD now instead of go to class, right? So now you know, this is the problem I think we are facing. You know, it's going so far, and this is why I think a lot of innovation now may not come from the so-called the discipline that you are kind of like, you know, like brought out with. Maybe it's a cross link. Maybe it's a cross link of a few. Okay, this is why I find it fascinating, right? Because you will see a lot of this kind of thing coming out now, and like Gerald say again, be humble, okay? Because to be honest, we only know so little, you know, in our lifetime. Okay, there are so many things that we don't know. So this is why, you know, if you go travel, if you go around or see someone, please check it out and see something that you maybe, you know, good. Because some of the skill that you have sometimes can be very useful for other people. And if you don't talk about it, you don't know that, right? So this is why, you know, be aware about this kind of like new thing coming out. Yeah.
Get out of the silo in a sense.
Yeah.
Almost.
And you have to be willing to kind of stick your head out, okay? At first you might feel embarrassed or whatever, but hey, everybody are embarrassed, to be honest, right? Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think that concludes our question, and we'll just have some last closing remarks from Abigo, all of you guys. And yeah, so first of all, thank you guys so much for attending and for participating. And yeah, Warren, any closing remarks?
Yeah, I'll end on something a little bit more broad, and maybe it's a little bit cliche, but especially in these types of times when things are changing so rapidly and with such great magnitude, as a new grad looking to start their own career, looking at the different opportunities out there, I'd say don't be afraid to chase your dreams and think outside the box. I think early in your career, you're probably in a better position to take on a little bit more risk because your career trajectory is not yet set in stone. So like, don't be afraid to take on these different challenges, work for different companies, gain a variety of different experiences before you decide what you want to do long term. And then I think this is something that Gerald opened with in one of his opening remarks, is that it comes down to passion, right? So once you find something that you're truly passionate about, I guarantee you will excel in that role. And that doesn't necessarily mean that what you're passionate about and what you're truly good at, and you know, the game-changing opportunity that you have for the world is dictated by what you have on a university degree on a piece of paper in these 4 years. Like, the world is your oyster. But that being said, I would say that make sure that you have a plan and be realistic about your objectives, and make sure that you are making career choices strategically. You know, don't make career changing decisions based on impulse, but at the same time, try to give yourself some degree of flexibility for when new opportunities arise.
Awesome. Gerald?
Yeah, I think kind of building off Warren said, I mean, one of the things I really am excited for the graduates of this year. I mean, it's been challenging. There's been some curveballs thrown at the graduates in terms of COVID and having to pivot to that. But you've gone through and you have a really good start in terms of your education. It's really important to be curious about the world, be curious about what's going on, be curious about everything, and look at the disruptive waves. I was talking to Ro about this, and in terms of before, about the impact of SpaceX and reusable rockets. And I'm just going to let you think about this, but the fact that you can use reusable rockets and drop payload costs down so far, that it actually creates an opportunity for space mining, for moving asteroids into low Earth orbits, that you can start to mine that. So there's no environmental impact. There's unlimited energy. There's all kinds of things. So being able to look at those technologies and say, okay, what's the ripple on that? And be able to try to pivot to that ripple. So be open, be curious, have fun.
Awesome. I like that ending. And Keng, last but not least.
Yeah, I think, regardless of what is happening in front of us today, the world is not like this, okay? Because, this is basically, you can look at it, it's just like a blip or a hump or something on the curve, and thing will turn around, right? And there are a lot of better things in front of us, right? And I think especially for the student at U of C or whatever, I think if you just look around, you are way ahead, in terms of like where you are compared to maybe 90% of the world population. So I think, like being so-called young and energetic, I think, first of all, you should just kind of venture out, like if you don't get a acceptance letter for a job, fine, that's okay. It's only 1 year or whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
Go around, that maybe there are some other thing that is even more fascinating than you thought. It's an eye opener, right? Because nowadays, I think the whole world is basically become very transparent now, right? For instance, like, it's just a matter of like when you go to one country to country, maybe you need a passport, but that is, it's a very minor stuff. But if you look at all sort of things that are happening around us now, it's more or less the same. And I think you should make good use of what you learn, right? Because a guy like like it's almost kind of pretty much on the retirement age now. Somebody had to come to like carry the ball, right? So I think like don't feel bad about what is going on, because it's always something like this. When I graduated at USC, like almost 40 years ago, the oil is only $8.
Yeah.
That's what it is. But we seem to be able to get by. So never get like discouraged about what's going on. It's just treat it as one of the so-called life experience, okay? And you will outgrown all this kind of difficulty. Don't worry about it. Anyway, good luck for everyone.
Absolutely.
I think that's a good place to end. So I will